My name is Vivian Hartwell. I am 41 years old, and the night I watched my husband bring another woman into our bedroom through the live feed of a smart vacuum cleaner, I was sitting in a hotel bar in Chicago eating a plate of cold penne pasta I had ordered 47 minutes earlier and forgotten about entirely. I did not throw my phone across the bar. I did not call him. I did not cry into my wine glass or rush to the bathroom or text a single person. I sat there in my Navy conference blazer and my lanyard from the 3-day marketing summit I had been attending, and I watched the grainy wide-angle footage on a 2-inch square on my phone screen, and I pressed the small cloud save icon in the top right corner of the iRobot app to confirm the footage was uploading to the server in real time. Then I set my phone face down on the mahogany bar top. I picked up my fork. I ate 3 bites of cold pasta. Because I was hungry, and because there was absolutely nothing useful I could do in that specific moment that could not wait until morning, when I would be clear-headed and rested, and already on the other side of what I needed to do next. What my husband did not know was that I had been quietly consulting a divorce attorney for 9 months. What he did not know was that I had methodically, legally, and with full financial advisement, restructured $240,000 into an individual account that existed entirely outside of our marital financial framework. What he did not know was that the Roomba i7 Plus I had given him as a birthday present the previous August had a live camera feature I had configured personally, connected to my email address and my phone, and never once mentioned to him in any conversation. And what he absolutely did not know was that the footage being captured on that Tuesday evening was timestamped, motion-triggered, cloud-archived at a remote server, and linked to a legal file that my attorney had been building and reinforcing for the better part of a year. This is that story. But before I go any further, I want to stop for just a moment. If you are watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, will you tell me in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is there? I find something genuinely meaningful in the idea that stories like this are heard from so many different places and time zones by women at different points in their own quiet journeys. Whether you are drinking your morning coffee or lying under a blanket at midnight, I want to know. And if you connect with stories about women who choose stillness over screaming and strategy over impulse, please like this video and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. Every story we share here is for the woman who has been dismissed and underestimated, and is, very quietly, building something extraordinary. Now let me tell you how we arrived at that hotel bar in Chicago. I grew up in Worthington, Ohio, a well-kept suburb north of Columbus where the lawns were maintained and the high school booster clubs were loud, and the particular social architecture of who mattered and who did not was something every child absorbed before the age of 10, whether they understood it or not. My parents were Gerald and Susan Parrish. My father coached high school lacrosse for 22 years and was beloved in the way that coaches of winning teams in small towns are always beloved, which is loudly and without much self-examination. My mother worked for nearly 30 years as a hospital registration coordinator at Ohio Health Riverside Methodist, which meant she woke every weekday at 4:45 in the morning, spent 8 hours managing the administrative entry point for one of the largest hospitals in central Ohio, and came home in the evenings to make dinner and help 3 daughters with homework, and never, not once in my memory, was acknowledged by my father for any specific tasks she had completed. Not once. He did not notice what she did. He noticed when it was not done. I watched that dynamic my entire childhood, and I told myself 2 things with the particular earnestness that young women carry before the world teaches them to be more cautious about their certainties. I told myself I would be nothing like my mother, and I told myself I would never choose a man like my father. I was half right. I put myself through Ohio State on academic scholarships and a part-time position at the Thompson Library, where I worked the evening shift shelving returns and reading everything I could find in the hours between closing carts. I graduated with a degree in communications and a minor in business. I took a position at a mid-sized advertising agency in Columbus for 2 years, worked obsessive hours, built a portfolio that got me accepted to Northwestern's master's program in communications at 24, and completed it with distinction at 26. By 28, I was managing brand accounts for a pharmaceutical company in Cincinnati. By 30, I was a regional marketing director. By 35, I was vice president of brand strategy, overseeing a team of 14 people and a budget that exceeded $11 million annually. I tell you all of this not to recite my resume, but because what comes later only makes sense if you understand the kind of woman I was when I walked into a charity gala in downtown Cincinnati on a Thursday evening in October and met a man named Daniel Hartwell. Daniel was 32. He sold commercial real estate for a firm headquartered in Blue Ash, and he was very good at it because he had the specific gift that the very best salespeople have, which is the ability to make every person in a conversation feel as though they are the most interesting person in the room. He was tall. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. He remembered the names of every person he was introduced to throughout the evening and used them in conversation in a way that felt effortless and warm rather than calculated. He helped an elderly woman with her coat near the coat check, without being asked, and without looking around to see if anyone had noticed. I noticed. I watched him do it from across the room, and I thought, with the kind of quiet certainty you feel about very few things in your life, that this was a good person. We were married 2 years later at a vineyard in Sonoma on a Saturday in September. My sister Eleanor was my maid of honor. His best man was his college friend from Ohio University, a man named Greg Weston, who gave a speech so long and so personally specific to Daniel's college years that 2 of the guests fell asleep. It was a beautiful day. The photographs are still excellent. I have not removed them from the hallway. We settled in Cincinnati in a 4-bedroom colonial on Devonshire Place in the Hyde Park neighborhood, 2 blocks from a park Nora would eventually spend entire summer mornings in. The house listed at $875,000. I negotiated it to $862,000. The down payment was $172,000. I contributed $152,000 from my savings. Daniel contributed $20,000. We both signed the mortgage. We both signed every document. I did not make a production of the numbers. We were building a life together, and in a life together, people contribute differently at different times. I believed that. I genuinely believed it. Our daughter Nora was born when I was 33 years old, on a February morning after 14 hours of labor that I got through primarily through controlled breathing and what my OB described, admiringly, as unusual composure for a first-time mother. Nora had brown eyes and a skeptical expression from the very first day and has maintained both consistently. She is now 7.5, in 2nd grade at a school she loves, with a reading level 2 grades ahead of her peers and strong opinions about dinosaurs, library organization systems, and which flavor of yogurt constitutes an acceptable breakfast food. She is the reason I did everything with the precision I did it with, not for revenge, not for victory. For her. Daniel's patterns began revealing themselves, the way slow erosion reveals stone, not dramatically. Not through a single identifiable incident, through accumulation. There was the spring of the year Nora turned 4, when I traveled to Atlanta for a conference Tuesday through Friday. I came home on a Friday evening to a kitchen that looked as though someone had attempted to make grilled cheese using a pan at the highest possible setting, and then abandoned the project. Nora was wearing the same yellow dress with the sunflowers on the hem that she had been wearing when I left on Tuesday morning. Her hair was unbrushed. Her school bag was still sitting in the front hallway unopened, and a note from her preschool teacher was tucked inside the front pocket, asking if everything was okay at home because Nora had seemed distracted that week. When I asked Daniel how the week had gone, he said, "Fine, low-key." She watched some movies. Nora, still in the yellow dress, told me she had pizza for dinner 3 times because Daddy said cooking was Mommy's job. She said it without accusation because she was 4 and had no framework for what it meant. I felt it land in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. I said nothing to Nora. I bathed her and braided her hair and read her 2 books and sat at the edge of her bed until her breathing went slow and even. Then I came downstairs and I had a very specific conversation with Daniel about what partnership means and what the word responsibility means in the context of a 4-year-old child who depends on 2 adults and not 1. He listened. He apologized. He said he would do better. He patted my hand. He did slightly better for approximately 3 weeks. There was the December when I asked Daniel to handle our holiday cards. I had already purchased 43 cards from a stationer in Hyde Park. I had typed and printed the address list in alphabetical order. I had written a brief personal note at the bottom of each card that Daniel only needed to sign his name beneath. I had left an envelope of stamps on his desk with a note that said simply, "Mail by December 20th. When a colleague mentioned in early February that our card had never arrived, I went home and opened the third drawer of Daniel's office desk and found all 43 cards, unsealed, unsigned, stacked exactly where I had left them. The stamps were still in the envelope. The address list was still alphabetical. "I forgot," he said. "You know I'm not good at keeping up with small things." "These are not small things, Daniel," I said. "These are our relationships." "That's more your department," he said. And I remember the phrase because it was so perfectly, casually dismissive that it took me a full 15 seconds to respond to it. As though I were a department. As though our shared life had organizational divisions and I ran several of the most labor-intensive ones by mutual agreement rather than by default. But the night that changed something in me at a deeper level than those other incidents was March the 14th, the year Nora was 5. I came home from a board dinner at 9:47 in the evening. The first thing I saw when I walked through the door was Nora asleep on the living room couch in her school uniform, her backpack still strapped across both shoulders, a bowl of dry cereal on the coffee table, most of it spilled. Her second-grade math worksheet was tucked under her arm. I picked it up and looked at it. She had completed 8 out of 10 problems in small, careful pencil handwriting. She had gotten 7 right. She had tried very hard, alone on a couch with a bowl of dry cereal, while her father was 30 feet away in his office with headphones on and a game controller in his hands. I stood in that living room for a long time, long enough for the kind of clarity that is made of accumulated evidence rather than any single emotion to arrive and settle. I carried Nora to her room. I took off her shoes and her backpack and covered her with the blanket from the foot of her bed. I did not wake Daniel. I went to my own room and I lay in the dark and I thought, with a precision I had not previously applied to my personal life, about what I was going to do. I did not decide anything that night. I gathered information first. That is the only way I know how to make decisions that last. The first call I made was to Bridget Calloway, a friend from a women's leadership network I had been part of for 6 years, who is also one of the most well-regarded family law attorneys in Cincinnati. I called her on a Tuesday in late March. From my office, door closed, coffee going cold on my desk. I told her that I was not ready to file anything but that I needed to understand my position. Bridget listened through the whole of it without interrupting, which is one of the things that has always made her exceptional in any room she occupies. She told me several important things. Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, which means documented misconduct is not required to proceed with a filing. However, she explained that documented contribution disparities and evidence of conduct that negatively impacted the marital household could have significant bearing on arguments around asset division, particularly in a situation like mine, where the financial record of the marriage told a very specific story. She also told me that any steps I took to protect my individual financial interests before a formal filing needed to happen within strict legal parameters. With documented reasoning and professional advisement, she gave me the name of Patricia Voss, a certified financial planner in Blue Ash who specialized in exactly this kind of pre-proceeding financial navigation. I called Patricia the following morning. We met in her office on a Thursday at noon, and I left 2 hours later with the clearest map of my own financial landscape I had possessed in 11 years of marriage. The marital estate was substantial. My contributions to it were documented. My options, while not unlimited, were more solid than I had imagined. Over the following months, I worked in the same methodical way I work through any complex, long-horizon professional challenge. I did not rush. I did not panic. I showed up to everything, professionally and personally, as the same competent, composed Vivian I had always been. Because I was not performing normalcy, I was exercising the right to operate within my own timeline, which is not the same thing. By June, I had established an individual investment account funded exclusively from a private branding consulting contract I had taken on alongside my primary employment. The income was reported. The structure was legal. The account was mine. By August, I had assembled 14 months of private journal entries documenting specific dates, times, and incidents related to the patterns I had been observing in our household. Not to be vindictive. To have a record of what was real, in language that could be understood by someone who had not lived through it. It was in August that I also purchased the Roomba E7 Plus. I had been meaning to for months. I genuinely wanted a robot vacuum because I was tired of managing the cleaning schedule along with every other logistical structure of our house. The iRobot i7 Plus had strong reviews, good mapping technology, and an automatic dirt disposal bin. I ordered it on a Thursday evening. It arrived on Saturday. I spent a Sunday afternoon setting it up, connecting it to the iRobot app using my email and my Apple ID, letting it map the 3 floors of the house, and reading through the feature list in the companion app. The live camera feature was listed under Home Intelligence. It accessed a wide-angle lens on the top of the unit and streamed a live view to the connected phone. Motion-triggered clips were stored in the cloud for 30 days under my account. I showed Daniel the app briefly, mostly to explain the room mapping function. He looked at my phone for approximately 90 seconds, said, "Huh, that's kinda cool," and went back to the college football game he had been watching. He never downloaded the app. He never asked about it again. I did not think about the camera as a strategic tool at the time. I thought about it the way you think about any product feature that seemed mildly interesting at setup and then faded into the background of daily routine. Until October the 6th, I was in Denver for a client presentation, staying at the JW Marriott downtown. It was a Tuesday evening and I was in my room reviewing slide decks for the following morning's meeting. At 9:14 Mountain Time, I opened the iRobot app to check whether the automated cleaning cycle had run. The live camera view loaded. The vacuum was docked in the upstairs hallway, which gave a partial view through the bedroom doorway. I saw Daniel. I saw a woman I did not recognize. They were in the bedroom. The manner in which they were together required no interpretation. I closed the app. I sat with what I had just seen for 45 seconds. I counted them. Then I opened the app again. Then I called Bridget. "Does the app record automatically?" she asked the moment I finished describing it. Motion-triggered clips. Cloud stored for 30 days. Account is in your name, my email, my password, my phone. His name appears nowhere in the account. A pause. "Vivian, do not confront him. Let the timeline develop. We need this documented over a pattern, not as a single incident." "I understand," I said. And that was the decision that changed everything. I flew home from Denver on Thursday. I came home to a clean kitchen, sushi containers in the recycling, and Daniel watching television. He kissed my cheek and said, "Welcome back." I set my bag down and asked about his week. He told me about a commercial lease negotiation in Blue Ash. I made tea. We watched 30 minutes of a documentary together. We went to bed. I lay in the dark beside him and felt the particular specific loneliness of sharing a bed with a stranger. And I breathed evenly and I went to sleep. Because I had a presentation at 7 the next morning and I needed to be rested. Now, if you are still with me, and if this story is sitting somewhere close to something you have experienced yourself, I want to pause and speak to you for just a moment. Drop a single word in the comments below that describes how you feel when you realize that someone you trusted with your whole life has been quietly choosing otherwise. Just one word. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I am asking you to do it right now. We create a news story every single day, and every one of them is for a woman who needed to hear that she is not alone in what she is carrying. Over the following 5 weeks, I observed 3 additional incidents on the camera feed. Each one was timestamped. Each one triggered a motion-recorded clip that was cloud archived automatically and then additionally saved by me to an encrypted folder on a personal device that was not connected to any shared account or shared network. In mid-October, I retained a licensed private investigator named David Frisch, whom Bridget recommended, and who came with an impeccable professional record. His role was narrow and specific: identify the individual in the footage, confirm her professional connection to Daniel, document any publicly observable interactions. He returned a preliminary report within 10 days. The woman's name was Amanda Freely. She was 33 years old. She worked in commercial leasing at a firm in Montgomery, Ohio, whose territory overlapped with Daniel's commercial real estate practice. They had been introduced at an industry networking event 14 months earlier. This information was gathered entirely from public professional records, LinkedIn activity, and a single observed public interaction outside a coffee shop on Vine Street that David documented with date and time in his report. The report was added to Bridget's file. On a Sunday evening in early November, I told Daniel that I needed to go to Chicago from the following Sunday through Thursday for a marketing conference. This was true. The conference was real. I had registered for it 3 months earlier. He said, "Sure, I'll figure out Nora." I arranged for Nora to stay with my mother in Worthington from Sunday through Wednesday, which I did not tell Daniel. I told him Nora was at a friend's house for a school project sleepover on Tuesday and Wednesday, which was plausible and which he did not question because the logistics of Nora's social calendar were not something he tracked with any consistency. I flew to Chicago on a Sunday morning. The conference was at a hotel in the Loop, and it was, professionally, an excellent 3 days. I attended every session I had intended to attend. I had 3 substantive conversations with colleagues that will likely result in future collaborations. I ate good food at 2 dinners that I genuinely enjoyed. I was, in every professional sense, entirely present. On Tuesday evening at 8:43 Central Time, I was sitting at the hotel bar waiting for a colleague who was running late from a panel discussion. I opened the iRobot app because the motion alert had notified me of activity. The vacuum was docked in its station in the upstairs hallway, camera pointing at a slight angle toward the master bedroom door. At 8:49, the camera registered motion. At 9:02, I saw Daniel come up the stairs with Amanda Freely. I pressed the cloud save icon. I confirmed the recording was active. I set my phone face down on the bar. My colleague arrived 11 minutes later. We talked for an hour about brand strategy and conference takeaways. I was present for every minute of that conversation. I am skilled at being present. I called Bridget from my hotel room at 11:37 that night. I told her what I had observed and confirmed I had the footage secured. She told me we were ready to file. I asked her how long from filing to service. 3 to 5 business days, she said, typically. I want to be home when it happens, I said. Then we'll file Monday morning, she said. The papers were filed at 9:07 on a Monday morning in November. I was at my office on the 15th floor of the building in downtown Cincinnati, where I have worked for 6 years. I wore the navy wool blazer I had purchased at a boutique near the Piazza Navona in Rome during a European conference 2 years earlier. Because I have always believed in dressing intentionally on significant days, even when the significance is invisible to everyone around you. My assistant, a perceptive woman named Claire who has worked with me for 4 years, commented that I seemed particularly focused that day. I told her I had a lot of calls scheduled. Daniel was served on Monday, November the 22nd, at 2:51 in the afternoon. I know this because Bridget's assistant texted me to confirm. I was in a quarterly budget review meeting. I excused myself for 90 seconds, walked into the hallway, heard the confirmation, said thank you, and walked back into the meeting. The remaining 40 minutes of the meeting were, by all accounts, unremarkable. Nora was at my mother's house in Worthington for the week, which I had arranged 10 days earlier under the framework of a pre-Thanksgiving tradition. My mother knew more than she let on. She is a perceptive woman, my mother. She's always been. I came home that evening at 6:28. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table. He had been crying, which I could see from the texture of his face. The particular redness around the eyes that cannot be entirely concealed even by someone who has composed themselves in advance of an encounter. There was an open bottle of bourbon on the table that was approximately a quarter full and had been approximately half full when it was a recent birthday gift from his brother. "You filed for divorce," he said. "Yes," I said. I set my bag down and my keys on the hook by the door. "I don't understand," he said. "You could have come to me. We could have talked about this. We have a daughter, Vivian. We have a life here." I looked at him for a long moment. "I know we have a daughter," I said. "That's exactly why I spent 9 months making certain this was done with complete care and precision." 9 months, he repeated. "Yes." He was quiet. Then he asked me if there was someone else. He asked me this with a directness that had a particular texture of projection underneath it, and I will tell you that I have replayed that question many times since that night, and each time I find it equally remarkable. "No, Daniel," I said, "there is not someone else." He asked me to reconsider. He asked twice more over the following 10 days, in increasingly different registers. He sent 3 texts over 4 days, each one more conciliatory than the last, moving from shock through reasoning to something that resembled genuine contrition. He called me once on a Thursday evening, and I listened to what he said and then told him calmly that our attorneys would handle the process from here. On a Friday in early December, he appeared in the lobby of my office building. I walked out at 5:45 with my colleague Marcus Belfield, whom I had told nothing about any of it, and I saw Daniel standing near the revolving door. I greeted him by name. I told him my attorney would be in touch. I said it in the tone of voice I use in board meetings when a discussion has reached its natural conclusion. Marcus told me 3 weeks later that he had genuinely not understood what he was witnessing in that moment and had been curious about it ever since. The discovery process was thorough. Bridget had constructed a documentation file that was precise and comprehensive, including the private investigator's report, the cloud-archived camera footage with timestamps, the 14 months of private journal entries, the financial records documenting my individual contributions to the marital estate, and correspondence relevant to the household dynamics I had documented. The deposition was in January. I was told, through channels that were appropriate for me to be told through, that when the footage was presented in that room, the atmosphere changed in a specific way. Daniel's attorney requested a brief recess, and when the session resumed, the tenor of the opposing counsel's approach had shifted materially. The settlement was reached in March, over 4 sessions of mediation that I attended with Bridget and Patricia Voss. I kept the house on Devonshire Place. The primary residential arrangement for Nora was established in my favor, with Daniel holding alternating weekend custody and defined holiday schedules. The asset division reflected the documented contribution record of the marriage in a manner that the opposing counsel ultimately chose not to contest at any length. Patricia sat through those mediation sessions with the specific quality of restrained satisfaction that people who have done their work very precisely sometimes permit themselves. I did not gloat. I did not perform triumph in any of those rooms. I sat where I was told to sit, and I reviewed what I was presented with, and I signed what needed to be signed, and I thanked the people who needed to be thanked, and I drove home each evening to my house, and made dinner and called Nora at her grandmother's, and helped her practice her reading over the phone. What I've come to understand in the year that has passed since that settlement was reached is something I want to say very directly to anyone who might need to hear it. Composure under pressure is not the absence of feeling. It is not numbness. It is not the performance of being fine. It is the decision, made in advance, and renewed each day, that your feelings deserve a time and a place that is appropriate to them, and that the time and place is not always now and not always here. I felt grief throughout those 9 months. I felt the specific loneliness of living inside a marriage that had already ended while still maintaining its exterior structure. I felt anger sometimes, late at night, quietly, alone in rooms where it could not cost me anything. I let myself feel all of it. I simply did not allow any of it to become the engine of my decision-making. The other thing I have come to understand is how much of what I was carrying was invisible to everyone around me. My colleagues did not know. My neighbors did not know. My sister Eleanor suspected because she knows me better than anyone. But she did not ask directly, and I did not volunteer it because I was not ready for the conversation to exist anywhere outside of the professional context where it was being managed. When the divorce became a matter of record and I began telling people, the most common response was some version of shock, not at Daniel's behavior, or not only at that, but at the duration and discipline of my silence. That Vivian had been doing all of that quietly for all that time, while showing up to every obligation and meeting and dinner and school event without a single visible fracture. I understand why that surprises people. We are conditioned to believe that pain which is not expressed publicly is not being felt fully, that the appropriate response to betrayal is visible devastation, that composed women are either unfeeling or in denial. None of those things are true. There is a cost to the composure. I want to be honest about that. The Tuesday evenings when Nora is at Daniel's and the house on Devonshire Place is very quiet and I am standing in the kitchen at 7 o'clock, not entirely certain what to do with the specific shape of that silence. That is real. The moment 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized, when I drove to a parking lot near the Ohio River and sat in my car for 22 minutes and felt the accumulated weight of 2.5 years of decisions that had been made carefully and correctly and at great personal cost. That was real. The nights when Nora comes home from her father's on Sunday evenings and tells me cheerfully about what they did, and I feel simultaneously grateful that she is okay and quietly bereaved for the specific version of our family that will not exist again. That is real, and it will probably always be real in some form. I am moving through it. I want you to know that I am not on the other side of it because I do not believe in pretending that recovery is a destination you arrive at queenly. I am in the middle of building something new from materials that are entirely mine, which is uncomfortable in some hours and extraordinary in others. Nora is thriving. Her reading is exceptional. She has decided she wants to be a marine biologist or possibly a librarian or possibly both, and I have told her that both is an entirely reasonable ambition. She spends her alternating weekends with her father and comes home Sunday evenings and tells me about their activities in the particular matter-of-fact narration of 7-year-olds. And I am grateful every Sunday for that narration. I have been promoted. I took a solo weekend trip to Savannah in February and sat on a hotel veranda in the late afternoon reading an entire novel in one sitting, which I have not done since before Nora was born. I had dinner with Bridget Calloway 3 times as a friend rather than a client, and discovered she is wickedly funny about institutional behavior and makes the best risotto I have had outside of Italy. I redecorated Nora's bedroom in colors she chose herself, which are an ambitious combination of deep ocean blue and the specific yellow of a daisy center, and the result is, objectively, wonderful. If you are sitting somewhere right now in a situation that resembles what I have described, I want to speak to you without the architecture of storytelling around it. Just directly, person to person. You do not have to perform your pain in a way that makes other people comfortable with its reality. You do not have to escalate or confront or broadcast to be valid. The discipline of building quietly and correctly is not weakness. It is often the most sophisticated strategy available. Protect your financial foundation before you need it. Find legal counsel you trust completely. Document what is real. Keep your decisions inside the logic of what you are building, not inside the emotion of what was done to you. And understand, please understand, that the timeline of your own recovery does not belong to anyone but you. Not to the people who love you and want you to be past it already. Not to the social expectation that you should be moving on. Not to anyone. You are allowed to stand in a kitchen at 7 in the evening in a quiet house and feel exactly what you feel. You are allowed to be in the middle of something and not yet at the end. That is not failure. That is simply how it works. You are allowed to sit at a hotel bar in Chicago and eat cold pasta and know with quiet certainty that you have already done everything that matters. The question I want to leave with you today, and I genuinely hope you will answer it in the comments, is this. Has there been a moment in your life when you chose quiet strategy over immediate reaction and understood later that the quiet choice was the one that protected you? I want to hear about it. I read every comment on this channel, every single one, and every one of them matters to me personally. Thank you for being here today, truly. This channel, these stories, this particular space we have built together would mean nothing without every one of you who watches, who comments, who shares, who subscribes. We are a small team with a deep commitment to telling these stories honestly and with the dignity they deserve, and we do it every single day because of you. If this story reached something in you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe if you haven't yet, because we are here every day with a new story. And we are always here for the woman who needed to hear today that stillness is not surrender. It never was. It never will be. I want to tell you more about the months between October, when I first saw what I saw, and November, when I filed. Because those weeks are the part of the story that no one asks about when they hear the abbreviated version, and they are also, in my opinion, the most important part. Most people, when they imagine discovering what I discovered, imagine an immediate response. A confrontation, a revelation, a moment of operatic consequence that resolves something quickly and conclusively. What they do not imagine is October the 7th. They do not imagine going to a 7-year-old's second-grade parent-teacher conference at 3:15 in the afternoon, sitting across a small table from a kind woman named Mrs. Abernathy, who told me that Nora was reading above grade level and had a gift for spatial reasoning, and being entirely present for every word of that conversation while carrying what I was carrying. They do not imagine October the 14th, which was a Saturday, when I took Nora to the Cincinnati Museum Center to see the natural history exhibits she had been asking about for months. And we spent 4 hours looking at dinosaur bones and Ice Age mammals, and she explained to me with complete authority why woolly mammoths were more interesting than elephants, and I laughed genuinely at her reasoning. They do not imagine October 21st, which was the evening of a dinner party at the home of our neighbors Robert and Helen Casper, where Daniel and I arrived together and sat at a dinner table with 6 other couples, and I had conversations about local politics and a recent renovation the Caspers had done in their kitchen in a book 3 of us had recently read, and I was, by every observable measure, completely fine. Those weeks are invisible in the public version of a story like mine, but those weeks are everything, because what they represent is not performance and it is not denial. They are what it looks like to hold 2 things simultaneously: the reality of what you know and the discipline of what you have chosen to do about it. Every single day of those 7 weeks between October and November was a decision I had to make again. Stay the course. Do not deviate. Let the timeline extend. Build it correctly. I called Patricia Voss twice during those weeks for what were ostensibly status check-ins, but were honestly the kind of calls you make when you need to hear a calm, professional voice confirm that the work you have done is solid. She confirmed it each time. She would say things like, "The documentation is clean and your position is clear," and once, "Vivian, you've done this right." I wrote that phrase in my journal because I needed it preserved. She has no idea she said something I still think about. There was a specific evening in late October that I have not described to anyone until now. It was a Wednesday, Nora was asleep, Daniel was in his office, and I was sitting in the reading chair in our bedroom at 11:30 at night with my laptop open and the encrypted folder pulled up. And I spent an hour going through every item in it, every timestamped screenshot, every motion clip reference, every journal entry, the investigator's report, the financial summary Patricia had prepared. I read through all of it with the same systematic attention I give to reviewing a campaign brief before a major pitch, looking for gaps, looking for anything that was not as solid as I needed it to be. There were no gaps. I had been very thorough. When I closed the laptop, I sat in the dark for a while, not planning, not rehearsing, just sitting with the weight of what I had built, the way you sit with a large piece of work after it is finished, but before it is submitted, when there is nothing left to do and the outcome is no longer in your hands. I thought about my mother, driving to Riverside Methodist in the dark at 4:45 in the morning for 30 years. I thought about her hands on the steering wheel and the way she used to hum without realizing she was humming. I thought about how she never once left my father, not because she did not want to, I suspected, but because she had never quite believed she had built enough to leave toward, that the structure of a life required someone else's name on it. I thought about Nora asleep in the room down the hall, and I thought, not for the first time, this is what I am doing it for. Not revenge, not victory. A structure that belongs entirely to her mother, which means it will eventually belong in some way to her. Then I closed the laptop and went to sleep. I also want to tell you something about Amanda Freely that I think matters for the complete picture of this story, even though Amanda Freely is not the primary figure in it. After the settlement was finalized, I learned through a mutual professional acquaintance that Amanda had ended her involvement with Daniel sometime in December, approximately 3 weeks after the divorce papers were served. I do not know the specific details of how that conversation went, and I did not seek them. What I do know is that by the time the mediation concluded in March, Daniel was, by all appearances, alone. He had moved into a leased apartment in the Oakley neighborhood in January, approximately a 20-minute drive from Devonshire Place, which made the logistics of Nora's handoff straightforward. I have no feelings toward Amanda Freely that I have been able to sustain beyond a brief and impersonal acknowledgement that she existed within this chapter of my life. Not anger, not sympathy, not curiosity. She made choices, and those choices had consequences. And those consequences were not mine to assign or to adjudicate. My legal and personal concerns were with the structure of my marriage and my financial security and the stability of my daughter's life, and none of those concerns required Amanda Freely's participation to resolve. What I have more complicated feelings about, and I want to be honest about this because I think it is important, is Daniel himself, not as the antagonist of this story, which is how this story is structured, but as a person I was married to for 10 years and with whom I made a daughter who is extraordinary. The Daniel I married at 29 in Sonoma was not a fiction. He was real. The way he helped the elderly woman with her coat was real. The way he remembered names was real. His laugh was real. Something happened over 10 years, gradually and without a single dramatic turning point, in which that person became someone who was comfortable with arrangements he had not explicitly chosen but had also never chosen to challenge, who found it easier to disappear into his office than to engage with the weight of what a shared life requires, who made decisions that were inconsiderate and ultimately, the last ones, unforgivable in the specific way that active betrayal is always unforgivable. I do not need to hate him. I do not. I need to have ended the arrangement that was not working and protected the structures that matter, and I did that. Whatever he is working through in his apartment in Oakley is his work to do. He has, I will say this, been consistent and engaged in his weekend visits with Nora. She comes home from those weekends with stories about things they did and food they ate, and sometimes a small gift she is proud of, and I receive all of this information in the spirit in which it is offered, which is the spirit of a 7-year-old who loves both of her parents and deserves to continue doing so without ambivalence from either of them. I have been intentional about that. It is work that I do not find effortless, but that I do with complete commitment. I want to tell you something else, about what has surprised me most in the year since the divorce was finalized. I expected relief. I got it. I expected logistical challenge. I got that too. What I did not anticipate was the particular quality of the mornings. This sounds small, and maybe it is small, but on the mornings when Nora is home and we have our routine, the specific silence of those mornings, the coffee, the reading, the school bag checked, the shoes found and placed by the door, Nora's running commentary about whatever she has been thinking about since she woke up, has a texture to it that our mornings did not have before. Something about knowing that every element of the life I am moving through was built deliberately and belongs to me fully has changed the quality of ordinary moments in a way I am still learning to articulate. It does not feel like victory. It feels like ground. Solid, actual ground. The kind that holds you when you put your weight on it. That, more than any specific outcome of the legal process, is what I was building toward. I just did not have the language for it until I was standing on it. There is one more scene I want to share before we reach the closing of this story, because it happened in a way that I did not orchestrate and did not plan for, and yet it became the moment that felt most complete. It was a Saturday in April, 4 weeks after the settlement was finalized. I was at a spring benefit for Nora's school, held at a hotel in the downtown Cincinnati area. It was one of those events that our social circle has always attended together. A fundraiser in a ballroom with round tables and a silent auction and a live band that plays songs everyone knows and most people pretend to have more opinions about than they do. I attended with my friend Diana Prescott, who knows everything about what had happened and has the specific gift of standing beside you at a crowded event in a way that requires no explanation. Daniel attended as well. We had known he might because several of the parents in our circle had texted both of us separately about it in the weeks before, navigating the logistics of the newly divided social geography with varying degrees of grace. I had expected the encounter. I had thought about it and decided I would be exactly what I had been throughout the preceding year. Present. Composed. Appropriate. He was standing near the silent auction tables when I arrived with Diana. He saw me across the room. He held my gaze for a moment. I gave him a brief, civil nod. He nodded back. And that was it. We spent 3 hours in the same ballroom and moved through them the way two people who once shared everything move through a shared space after the sharing has ended, with a kind of careful, precise coordination that has no warmth, but also no hostility. Because the children in that room, including ours, did not need to absorb anyone's unresolved emotions. What happened that was unplanned was this. About 90 minutes into the evening, a woman I know slightly, a member of the school board named Patricia Horton, stopped me near the bar to ask me a question about an advisory committee she was forming for a new initiative in the school district. We talked for perhaps 12 minutes. Her question was substantive, and she was asking me in a professional capacity because of work I had been doing in communication strategy over the past several years. Near the end of the conversation, she said, and I am going to quote her because the phrasing stayed with me, "I've always thought you were the most capable person in most rooms you walk into. I just wanted you to know that." I thanked her. I meant it. And as she walked away, I stood there holding my glass of sparkling water, and I thought about what she had said and about the preceding 18 months and about what I had built and how I had built it and what it had required. And I felt something that was neither triumph nor relief nor grief, but something quieter and more complete than any of those. The specific satisfaction of someone who did a very hard thing the right way, alone, in silence, and arrived on the other side of it intact. I looked across the room at Nora, who was at the children's table near the windows with 2 of her friends, working with great seriousness on a piece of drawing paper someone had provided. She had her head bent over the paper in the way she does when she is concentrating, that absolute absorption that I love most about her. She looked up, found me across the room, and waved with the quick, distracted wave of a child who is very busy but wanted to confirm I was still there. I waved back. That was the moment I understood the word that describes everything I had done and everything I had chosen. It was not revenge. It was not justice exactly. It was reclamation, the reclamation of a life that had drifted, gradually and then all at once, into a shape that was not mine, and the quiet, patient, deliberate work of building it back into something that was.